Hey guys, welcome to the last section of lesson 811. We finally have reached the end of this rather large section. And this one is going to be all about some vocabulary. You might have heard me use these words throughout the school year, and it might seem like they're interchangeable, and that's because they're very similar and they kind of allude to similar things, but there are situations where you got to use one or the other. So it's really important for your own knowledge and also for the MyOpen math problems that you know how to distinguish between these guys. So starting with roots. Now, what I'll point out right away is that roots and zeros are actually the same exact thing, so you can make a note of that. Okay. And what they are is the numbers that are going to make your equation equal 0 when you plug them in. And based on the zero product property that we used early on, we know that in order to figure out what would make our equation equal to 0, all we got to do is set each factor equal to 0 and solve. So when you do this one, you add 2 to both sides, you get an answer of 2. And when you do this one, you subtract 1 from both sides, and you get -1. So we know that our roots are going to be 2 and -1. Now, something to notice is that this x plus 1 factor has an exponent of 2. So technically, we should name that root twice. All right, so now zeros, like I said, it's the same exact thing. The name zeros is actually just more convenient because it's a lot more obvious, right? We're literally looking for the numbers where when you plug them into the equation, you get an answer of zeros. So, well, 0. So that is that for those two. Now the x-intercepts, that is where your graph is going to hit your x-axis. So you actually are going to use your zeros to form these. We know that x-intercepts are always some number comma 0 for the y value because they're literally on the axis. They don't move up or down. And we just have to use the zeros to fill those in. So we have one x-intercept at 2, 0, and we have another one at -1, 0. For this one, we don't have to list that second one because it's literally talking about a coordinate point on the graph, and so we only have to talk about that once. And lastly, for factors, this is very conveniently already in factored form, and so we know our factors are x minus 2 and x plus 1. Okay, and we can even list x plus 1 twice because there are 2 of them technically, right? In our equation, if there's an x plus 1 squared, that's the same thing as saying that there's an x plus 1 times another x plus 1. All right, so figuring out this information from factored form is relatively simple. And when you go to standard form, like we have here, it changes a little bit, but that is what our calculator is for. So recall from the last video that when things are in standard form, it's a lot harder to find some pieces of information. And so typing those in your calculator to graph them comes in handy. So we're just going to go ahead and type out that equation as we see it. Oh, yikes. Let's try this again. Oh my goodness. It's trying to wonder why I chose such a long equation. But that's all right. Okay. Plus 24. Okay, so let's just check to make sure we wrote it right. X to the 4th plus 2x cubed minus 13x squared minus 14x plus 24. That looks right. And let's go ahead and graph that. All right, and I do like to look at things in the standard zoom, so I'm going to go ahead and hit zoom and go to that 6th option where it says zoom standard. This will give us a nice 10 by 10 view. So to find the x-intercepts first will be the easiest. So because we're in Zoom Standard, we can actually just count the tick marks, because in Zoom Standard on our graph, every tick mark, it just changes by 1. So our first x-intercept, if we look, there's 1, 2, 3, 4. This is on the 4th tick mark, and so we know that one of our x-intercepts is going to be at -4, 0. Okay, and if we look here, it's at the 1, 2, second tick mark. So we have a -2, 0. The next one is at +1. And the final one is at 1, 2, 3, so 3, 0. All right, once we find all the x-intercepts, we can just use those to find the rest of this information. So if you look at our previous example, notice how the zeros and roots were actually the same numbers as our x-intercepts, or at least the x-values of our x-intercepts. So we know just by looking at the numbers in the x-value for these points, our roots are -4, -2, 1, and 3. And again, we just use those same values for zeros. Okay, nice and easy. And for factors, now notice here we really were able to just take them from the problem, but we can't do that here. However, it's important to see that the factors have the opposite signs as our actual x-intercepts, right? So our x minus 2 went with our 2, 0. X plus 1 goes with -1, 0. So we're taking the opposite for our factors. That -4, 0 is going to give us a factor of x plus 4. -2, 0 will give us a factor of x plus 2. 1, 0 will give us x minus 1. And lastly, that 3, 0 will give us a factor of x minus 3. Again, we are taking the opposite of this number when we're writing it in our factor. Okay, and lastly, all we have to do is take these factors and kind of arrange them like we saw in this problem, because this is in factored form, and that's exactly what we want here. So I will just go ahead and write my f of x and say that f of x is equal to x plus 4 times x plus 2 times x minus 1 times x minus 3. I literally just took all of these factors and stuck them in my equation. And that is it. That is the end of lesson 811. Hope you guys are staying safe and healthy, and I will see you in the next video.